Go.
Okay. Hello, Dad. So I'm gonna show you the trick for setting up or getting the tire mounted, even if they're really tight. Hello, dog. So this right now is set up tubeless. There's not even any sealant in it, and there's no tube in there. It's inflated. Pretty cool setup, but I'm gonna let all the air out. And I'll take it off, and then I'll show you how easy it should be, and give you a couple tips. So this is it's a 40 millimeter wide. It's the Vittoria Adventure Trail. This is the one that you have. So I promise I'm not cheating. And I'm gonna put a tube in there, how you're gonna mount it up probably too. So, they do come out of the package kind of like floppy, it seems like. So when they come out of the packaging, I'll pull it off of there. They're folding tires. So obviously, yeah, you're gonna take the new one out and you're gonna have to kind of like work it around a little bit and just make it round. Because actually getting the first side on of it was a little tricky for me. But, so this is how tubeless stuff works too. There's a little valve stem in there, and then the rim is all taped up. So these are just like regular rims, and they're 17 millimeter wide rims, which are the same as the ones you're gonna put them on. So, Leanne's doing camera work here. She's gonna get a close up of, notice the rim profile. And if you were to like take a cross section of it, the way that it's shaped is like a U, and that's pretty important for the little trick that I'm going to show you. So we're gonna mount the best way to do it that I found. Get the tire tread pointing, arrows up, arrows pointing forward. Notice this is the side with the gears. So the arrows pointing forward on top is the rotation direction. And I put one side of the bead on first. And notice I'm doing this with a broken hand, so like if I can do it with one hand, you can probably do it with two. So it's always the last little bit of the bead that's tight, right? And so the trick is to make sure that the bead is sitting in the middle of the rim, because if you think of it like the U is the cross section, the smallest diameter of the rim, it's going to give you the most slack in the bead, is in the middle. So as long as this thing is sitting in the middle here and not like, up on the side of the rim there, then it should be able to be popped on there pretty easily. And I can just do it with one hand. The first one's always easier to get on. Another tip, so these are such wide tires. Actually, I'll talk to you in a minute here. First of all, they are wide tires, so you should get some slightly wider tubes in them. This one is, I think, up to 43 millimeter tires. So you're like the tubes. See, it says 35 to 43, 700 is the diameter. If your tubes that you have say less than like 28. You should probably get some bigger ones. If they say like 30-ish or something like that, you're probably fine. You can use tubes that are smaller than the range, but not so tiny because they're made for skinny tires, because you're going to run the risk of puncturing or having less strength to the tubes. So I'm going to find the valve stem. First, I like to put some air in it, which you can do with a pump or you can do with your lungs. And I put the valve stem in first. Where is it? Where's the hole? I can't find it. Oh, it's down there. Valve stem in first. Go around and tuck this into the tire. And then to get the second half, this is the tricky part, right? I want to start from the far end opposite the valve stem, and work our way around both sides at the same time simultaneously. And I'll show you why I start on the opposite side of the valve stem. But it's possible it can get to be kind of a pain. The only reason I put air in it is to give it shape. so it doesn't like get folded over when you're trying to mount the bead, and then when you inflate it, it's all folded and gross. So to give it shape is good. You can let some air out of it, like open up the valve stem now that we're getting close to actually having it mounted. And then, because you don't want too much air in there when you're trying to get the last little bit on. Okay, so this is always the problem here, right? It's how to get that last little bit on. What I do before I try to pull that on is I shove this thing up in there, and that makes it so that the tube doesn't get pinched on the last little bit of really tight bead before it gets over the edge of the rim. Because if you have tube hanging out in between there, as you pull that tight bead on there, it'll get really pinched. Okay, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to hold the rim like that. So you're holding tension on the bead. You've got the fingers tucked in under the bead there like that. And with the other hand, go around the rim and just make sure, like we were saying, that the bead of the tire that you're trying to get on is sitting as much in the middle as possible. You need to hold it like that because that keeps tension on the bead, right? And so once I've gone around and I've made sure that, like, okay, I'm pulling tension and I've got the bead in the skinniest possible place on the tire, then I can go ahead and I can start, I'm keeping tension on it the whole time, right? And I'm gonna start working that last little bit of bead on there. Okay, still have it. I'm almost doing this one-handed, and it should pop right on there like that, no struggles. So it's in there. I take this thing and I shove it up in there again too, and I kind of just work it around to make sure there's no tube sitting between the bead of the tire and the rim. The last thing, for these wide tires, it's quite common when you go to inflate them that they get kind of wonky, like only one side of the bead kind of works up to where it's supposed to sit on the rim and the other side doesn't, and so you end up with these like lumps in it. The best way to mitigate that is to take some soapy water, and I would say like just thin out some hand soap or dish soap, like 1-to-1, just make it really thin, and just use your fingers and just rub it in there real quick so that it lubricates it, because that rubber gets really sticky on the edge of the rim when you go to inflate it. But if you've got a little layer of soap, that gives it some lubrication, and then when you go to inflate it, it should pop right up on there. So those are the tricks.